Special thanks to Epic Beats for providing the soundtrack to NBA What If. Click the link down below in the description to check him out on other platforms and show support.
Time. Space. Reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility, where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the ones you know. I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
The early 2000s marked a new era for the NBA. The Michael Jordan era had officially ended, and a new crop of stars were ready to take over. Kobe and Shaq, Allen Iverson, Kevin Garnett, Vince Carter, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce. But a little known fact is that two of these stars, Tim Duncan and Tracy McGrady, nearly became one of the greatest dynamic duos the game had ever seen. What if Tim Duncan had signed with the Orlando Magic in the year 2000? Drafted in 1997, 9th overall by the Toronto Raptors, Tracy McGrady showed great promise early in his career. So much promise that he was nearly traded for Scottie Pippen. Of course, Michael Jordan said, "Hell no!" He was athletic and skilled and had talent you simply couldn't teach. But after the Toronto Raptors drafted his legendary cousin, Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady thrived in the six-man role. The problem was that he knew what everybody else knew. That role was just simply too small for him. Enter the Orlando Magic. The Magic was searching for its first star since Shaq and Penny, and Tracy McGrady was looking to run his own show. It was a perfect match. T-Mac would go on to sign a 7-year, $93 million contract in the summer of 2000 with the Orlando Magic. In 2000-2001, T-Mac became one of the biggest stars in the NBA. That year, T-Mac averaged 26.8 points a game, 7.5 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks on 46, 35, 73 splits. The Magic finished 43-39 that season and lost 3-1 to the Bucks in the playoffs. Before being traded in the summer of 2004, T-Mac stamped himself as one of the best scorers of his generation. As a member of the Magic, T-Mac had 3 top 6 MVP finishes, a career-high 32.1 points per game, 4-time All-NBA selection, 26 40-point games, 3 50-point games, and 1 60-point game. He was a 2-time scoring champion, most improved player of the year, and a 4-time All-Star in his years with the Orlando Magic. Another member of the 1997 NBA draft, Tim Duncan, went first overall to the San Antonio Spurs. In contrast to Tracy McGrady, Duncan was off to a very fast start prior to free agency in 2000. From 97 to 2000, Duncan had 3 top 5 MVP finishes, 2 top 5 Defensive Player of the Year finishes, 3-time All-Defense, 2-time All-Star, 3-time First-Team All-NBA, and an NBA champion in 1999, and was also Finals MVP after posting 27 points per game, 14 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1 steal, 2.2 blocks per game, and a gentleman's sweep of the New York Knicks. When the summer of 2000 came around, the balance of power could have shifted in a way that would completely rewrite NBA history. That summer, names like Tim Hardaway of the Miami Heat, Cuttino Mobley of the Rockets, Grant Hill of the Pistons, Glenn Rice of the Lakers, Reggie Miller of the Pacers, Tracy McGrady of the Raptors, and Tim Duncan of the San Antonio Spurs were all set to hit free agency. Duncan ultimately chose to return to the Spurs, a decision that would serve him well for the entirety of his career. From 2000 to 2004, Duncan would battle the Lakers for supremacy out west. In 4 straight meetings in the playoffs, San Antonio went 1-3 versus LA in that span, beating the Lakers in 6 games en route to a second NBA championship in the Duncan era in the year 2003. In those 4 seasons, Tim Duncan won 2 MVPs with 4 top 2 finishes, 4-time All-Defense, 4-time First-Team All-NBA, 4-time All-Star, 2-time champion, 2-time Finals MVP, posting stats of 24 points per game, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 5 blocks in 6 games versus the New Jersey Nets in 2003 to capture his second championship. Looking back at the individual talent of McGrady and the dominance of Tim Duncan, one can only imagine what would have happened if these 2 legends ever joined forces. When this what-if scenario was brought to Grant Hill's attention, he actually confirmed that this was almost a reality.
He was ready to join y'all in Orlando until Doc Rivers said, no, your family cannot come on the team plane, and that's what made him stay in San Antonio?
Rachel. Not only have I heard that, I was there.
Oh.
I was on the same, I made my visit with Tim Duncan.
Okay.
And I was at the dinner when someone in Tim's entourage, I'll just leave it that way, asked Doc, can significant others travel on the plane?
It was a deal breaker at dinner with Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, Timmy's, I think it was fiance at the time. And I think she asked Doc Rivers a question about can, the spouse fly on the family fly on the team plane? Mm-hmm. And I think Doc answered that, in a way that she didn't like it. And I think that was the deal breaker.
Doc said no.
In order to paint a more realistic picture of what this duo would have looked like, we will be using a number of approaches: win shares, stats, roster makeup, Eastern Conference landscape, and how the players' abilities complement each other. For the sake of this conversation, we will be assuming that Grant Hill was still injured for most of the time from 2000 to 2004. Let's start with the players themselves. Tracy McGrady stands at 6'8", 210 pounds. He was a limitless scorer, had good enough handle to get anywhere he wanted to on the basketball court. He was able to raise up and shoot over anyone. He can go left, he could go right, he can score with his back to the basket, he can get downhill. And if you are a big, take caution, because Tracy McGrady was a flight risk. 2 of the more underrated parts of his bag was his scoring without the basketball and his passing. Not really known for his defense, but he was a willing defender. Along with his 28.1 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, he would post 1.5 steals and 1 block per game as well. Let's talk about the big fundamental. We often call Tim Duncan the greatest power forward ever, but I'm not sure we truly understand how great he was. We say Shaq is the most dominant big of the era, but Tim Duncan was not that far behind. His post-up game was unstoppable, turnover each shoulder, face-up game was just as lethal, his bag on the block was bigger than Santa's if there was no naughty list, not to mention his ability to pick and pop and knock down the mid-range. On defense, he was just as much of a problem as he was on offense. His timing and basketball IQ made him a great shot blocker. His ability to communicate made him one of the best defensive anchors of all time. His ability to communicate on both sides of the basketball and dominate on both sides of the basketball is what made him a back-to-back MVP of the league. From 2000 to 2004, Duncan posted averages of 23 points per game, 12.6 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and 2.6 blocks per game. Now, an irresponsible fan would jump to the conclusion that they be just an Eastern Conference version of Kobe and Shaq and win all of these rings, that they would be just as dominant in the Eastern Conference as Kobe and Shaq were out west. But that isn't the case automatically. Yes, you'd be adding Tim Duncan to the Orlando Magic, but the Spurs were much better at building a team around its star forward. Tony Parker, Ginobili, Ori, Malik Rose, David Robinson, Bruce Bowen, Jackson, Finley, and even Coach Popovich. When you look at the Orlando Magic roster, it's hard to believe that they were championship ready, but it's also not hard to believe in the dominance of Tim Duncan being added to the phenom that is Tracy McGrady. In the year 2000-2001, the Orlando Magic posted a starting 5 of Darrell Armstrong, Tracy McGrady, Mike Miller, Bo Outlaw, and a combination at the center position of Michael Doliak and Andrew DeClercq. That roster was good enough for 43-39, a 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, posting 97.5 points per game, 6th in the league, 96.5 opponent points per game, 18th in the league, 103.2 offensive rating, 14th in the league, 102.1 defensive rating, 10th in the league, and they went on to lose to the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA playoffs 3-1 in the first round. You would be adding Tim Duncan to the 2000-2001 Orlando Magic for that NBA season. You would be adding 13.2 win shares from Tim Duncan, which would ultimately translate to roughly 53 wins. Offensively and defensively, his presence would help this team immensely. They would instantly become a top 3 offense in the NBA, and they will also become a top 10 defense in the NBA. In 30 games versus the Eastern Conference, Tim Duncan would post 21.5 points per game, 11.7 rebounds, 3 assists, and his performance ratings were relatively the same, translating East versus West. In this scenario, we're going to be viewing the 2000-2001 Orlando Magic as a 53-win, 29-loss, 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. In this scenario, their journey will take them through the Charlotte Hornets, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Philadelphia 76ers en route to a trip to the NBA Finals. The first challenge to the Tim Duncan, Tracy McGrady pairing will be the Charlotte Hornets. Right off the bat, looking at the numbers, 31-17 for Duncan, 25-5 for Tracy McGrady versus the Hornets makes this a sweep in my book. In the next round, the Milwaukee Bucks. Looking at Tim Duncan's performance versus the Bucks, his numbers have come back down to earth just a little bit, but 21.5, 12.5 rebounds, and 1 block per game is nothing to scoff at. On the other hand, you look at Tracy McGrady posting 28, 7.7, 4 assists per game with 2.6 steals. His performance is going to be enough to help the Orlando Magic get a 4-3 series win over the Milwaukee Bucks. And now looking at the Eastern Conference Finals matchup versus the Philadelphia 76ers, we can clearly see that Tim Duncan struggled against the Sixers. 19.5, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 blocks, 57, 62.5 splits. We can see that the matchup for him was challenging, but you look at the other side of the coin where Tracy McGrady is posting 30 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and he's shooting 40, 85, 30 splits. That's going to be enough for the Orlando Magic to get a 4-2 series win versus the Philadelphia 76ers and their stout defense. In the 2001 NBA Finals, we get an NBA Finals showdown for the ages. The post dominance and perimeter scoring that will be on display set the bar for what championship basketball would look like going forward. Shaq versus Duncan, Kobe versus T-Mac, Lakers versus Magic for the biggest prize in the NBA. That year, the Lakers had a record of 56-26 on the backs of Shaq and Kobe, making the Lakers a top 3 offense in spite of having a defense in the bottom third of the league. That year, Kobe and Shaq absolutely dominated the playoffs en route to a trip to the NBA Finals. Kobe posting up 29, 7, 6, Shaq posting up 30 and 15, absolutely dominated the Western Conference. Tim Duncan, Tracy McGrady, they had very good performances versus the LA Lakers throughout the course of that season. Duncan having played them in the NBA playoffs in the year 2001. We're going to use his stats for that series. Duncan posting 23, 12, 4. Tracy McGrady posting 27, 9, 6.5, 2.5 steals, and an impressive 1.5 blocks. This would be a hard-fought series with the Lakers winning in 6 games, allowing the most dominant duo of that era to win back-to-back championships. In 2001-2002, the Orlando Magic posted a starting 5 of Darrell Armstrong, Tracy McGrady, Mike Miller, Pat Garrity, Horace Grant, and Patrick Ewing coming off of the bench as a 6th man. That team went on to win 44 games and 38 losses as a 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. They posted 100.5 points per game, 10th in the league, 98.9 opponent points per game, 13th in the league, 106.1 offensive rating, 14th in the league, 104.8 defensive rating, 12th in the league, and they lost 3-1 to the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA playoffs first round. We're going to be adding Tim Duncan to the 2001-2002 Orlando Magic. That year, Tim Duncan had 17.8 win shares. Doing some calculations, running some numbers, we're going to say that the Orlando Magic would win 56 games and lose 26. You're going to be adding Tim Duncan's dominance and Tracy McGrady's ultimate efficiency that season, and you're going to come up with a top 5 offensive team. You're also going to have them be top 10 to top 5 on the defensive side of the ball, considering the fact that Tim Duncan was a first-team all-defense member once again, and he was in his MVP season. Looking at it overall, 25.5 points per game for Tim Duncan, 12.7 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 2.5 blocks, MVP of the league. Both of these players were all NBA first team, and both of them were top 5 in MVP voting. They're going to go into the playoffs as a dominant first seed. En route to the NBA Finals appearance, they must go through the Indiana Pacers, the Boston Celtics, and the New Jersey Nets. The first challenge to the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference will be the Indiana Pacers. Tim Duncan posting 26 points, 15 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and Tracy McGrady posting 21, 6.5, 4.8 makes me believe that this is good enough to get a sweep of the Indiana Pacers. Looking on to the next round, we have a matchup with the Boston Celtics. You're going to get 31, 11, 2.5 from Tim Duncan, very efficient versus the Boston Celtics, but Tracy McGrady struggled quite a bit. 18.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 4.8 assists. I think this is going to be a very good series, a hard-fought series, 4-2 in favor of the Orlando Magic. Now, when you look at the conference finals, when you go toe-to-toe with the New Jersey Nets, both of these players had great performances. Both of these players had great success versus the New Jersey Nets. When looking at the Orlando Magic going toe-to-toe with the New Jersey Nets, I see dominance from Tracy McGrady in 28, 10.5, and 5 assists. I see dominance in 29.5, 11.5, 3.5 from Tim Duncan, and great efficiency across the board. That would lead me to believe this is going to be a 4-1 gentleman's sweep in favor of the Orlando Magic. In the 2002 NBA Finals, as told by Outside the Playbook, the Sacramento Kings will not be going home. They will actually be going on to the NBA Finals because they will not be cheated out of a Game 7 win versus the LA Lakers on their home court. That season, the Kings went 61-21 on the backs of a top 3 offense and a top 6 defense while playing the fastest pace in the league. Tim Duncan and Tracy McGrady had great success versus the Kings that year. Duncan going 22, 14.5 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 2.25 blocks, 45 and 92 splits. Tracy McGrady was dominant, going 32.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.5 steals, 46, 44, and 80, and the Orlando Magic will win the NBA Finals versus the Sacramento Kings in the year 2002 with a record of 4 wins and 2 losses. The start of the 2002-2003 NBA season was not what the Orlando Magic had in mind. Even with T-Mac averaging a career-high 32.1 points per game, they got off to a 24-26 start heading into the All-Star break. Grant Hill was able to play 29 games before going down with a season-ending injury versus the Washington Wizards. They would ultimately have to make the decision to trade Mike Miller to the Memphis Grizzlies for the rookies Drew Gooden and Goran Gierczak. The Magic would improve in the second half of the season, going 18-14 and 42-40 overall in the regular season. They posted averages of 98.5 points per game, which was 6th in the league, 98.4 opponent points per game, 24th in the league, 105.2 offensive rating, 10th in the league, and a 105 defensive rating, 20th in the league. Adding Tim Duncan's 2002-2003 season to this Orlando Magic team would prove to be a major difference maker. The Magic not having a power forward at the time is what caused them to move Mike Miller, and Tim Duncan's presence would have made it vital to keep Miller versus using him as a trade asset. Duncan posted averages of 23.3 points per game, 12.9 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 2.9 blocks, 51 and 71 splits to earn his second league MVP. Duncan had an efficient season and was an elite offensive post presence, but his contributions would be felt more on the defensive side of the basketball. A first-team all-defensive team member, 94 defensive rating, and his near 3 blocks a game will bolster the defense with elite rim protection. To say they would be top 10 is not guaranteed, but based on his 6.9 defensive win shares, you can assume that the Orlando Magic will finish around 50-32 record on the season. This would make them a number 2 seed out east because using actual history from that season, the Pistons will own the tiebreaker over the Magic 2-1. Path to the NBA Finals for the 2 seed that year would have been Boston, New Jersey, and ultimately the Detroit Pistons. In 2003, the round 1 matchup will be the Orlando Magic versus the Boston Celtics. Tim Duncan was posting 20 points, 8.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists versus the Celtics that season, while Tracy McGrady averaged 30, 6.5, 4 assists of his own with 41, 72, 41 splits. In the playoffs, that would be good enough for a 4-game sweep of the Boston Celtics. On to round 2, the New Jersey Nets versus the Orlando Magic. Duncan posting 21, 14.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 44, 55, 100 splits, with Tracy McGrady adding 31 points, 8 rebounds, 6.8 assists on 45, 83, 32 splits. That would be good enough for a gentleman's sweep of the New Jersey Nets. On to the conference finals. Orlando Magic, Detroit Pistons. This is going to be a 7-game series. Tracy McGrady was putting up 33 points, 6.7 boards, 3.7 assists, shot 43, 83, 22 splits, with Tim Duncan posting 23.5 points, 16 rebounds, 2 blocks, 50 and 58 splits. This will be a hard-fought 7-game series with the Magic going 4-3 in that series to go on to the NBA Finals. The Magic, T-Mac, and Tim Duncan are then gifted with the opportunity to avenge the what-if loss to the Los Angeles Lakers from our 2001 simulation. Because Tim Duncan beat the Lakers in the 2003 playoffs, Western Conference semifinals, we will be using those stats. Now, I have the Magic winning 4-2 and clinching their 2nd consecutive NBA championship on the heels of Tim Duncan posting 28 points, 11.8 boards, 4.8 assists, 1.3 blocks, 53 and 70 splits, Tracy McGrady posting 30 points, 4.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 47, 68, 100 splits, dominant fashion, even though the series was 4-2. The 2003-2004 NBA season is the most difficult to hypothesize. That season, the Orlando Magic had one of the worst, if not the worst, starts to an NBA season of all time. They started 1-19 through the first 20 games and only won 8 games through December of 2003. They would go on to finish 21-61 that year, and Doc Rivers wouldn't even make it to Christmas as the head coach of the Orlando Magic. Although the Magic organization doesn't have the winning culture of the Spurs, Duncan's greatness can still lead a team to a winning season. The combination of Duncan and McGrady will get the Magic to the playoffs, but the million-dollar question is, how would they stack up against the 2004 Detroit Pistons? Before making this comparison, we have to establish a few things. Doc Rivers will still be the head coach, the Magic will make the playoffs, and regardless of the outcome, Tracy McGrady will opt out of his contract at the end of that season. When looking at the seeding for each conference, you'll realize that the 4th seed or lower in the East would not qualify for the playoffs in the Western Conference. To add this information to the numbers Duncan and T-Mac put up versus the East, it's easy to deduce that they are on a collision course with the new-look bad boy Pistons for the 2nd playoffs in a row. The 2003-2004 Detroit Pistons are often hailed as one of the greatest defensive teams in NBA history. They were bottom third in the league in points per game. They were bottom third in the league in offensive rating, but they were second in the league in opponent points per game. They were second in the league in defensive rating, and they were number one in the entire NBA in fan attendance. No team embodied the identity of a city the way that team did. The grit, the fire, the passion, the toughness. Much like the city itself, Detroit was a force to be reckoned with. If the Orlando Magic duo went toe-to-toe with the Detroit Pistons squad, this is how it would play out. Rasheed Wallace would be tasked with guarding Tim Duncan, but having a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year as your low man makes that job so much easier. Duncan only put up 14.5 points, 11.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists versus the Detroit Pistons that year, by far his lowest output versus any team that season. To limit McGrady's defensive workload, he'll be matched up with Tayshaun Prince instead of Richard Hamilton. Even though McGrady will put up 25, 5, 8.5 versus Detroit, he'd shoot terrible from the field, shooting 29% from the field and 18% from three. Without Grant Hill, the task of guarding Pistons leading scorer Rip Hamilton will fall to Mike Miller. Even though he was a team defender, a very good one, Hamilton's movement, strong screen set by Big Ben and Sheed, it would wear him down the longer the series goes on. The final piece to the puzzle is Doc Rivers versus Larry Brown. Both having one ring with two supremely focused teams, the edge goes to Brown for the dominance of the 04 Pistons. This series would be over in 5 games with a clinic put on by the Detroit Pistons, led by Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace. The remainder of the 2003-2004 NBA season would play out just the same. The Detroit Pistons would go on to defeat the LA Lakers in 5 games behind the MVP of the finals, Chauncey Billups. But the history of the NBA moving forward would hang in the balance, hinging on the decision of one Tracy McGrady. In 2004, T-Mac told the Magic that he would opt out of his deal. But in our retelling, in our what if, winning 2 rings in 4 years with Tim Duncan made his decision to re-sign the most obvious choice. But what does that mean for the history of the NBA moving forward? Because the Orlando Magic no longer had the worst record in the NBA that year, Dwight Howard would end up being drafted first overall by the Chicago Bulls. Based on his development, that would mean Derrick Rose would not be the first overall pick to the Chicago Bulls. Derrick Rose could end up in a Miami Heat jersey next to Dwayne Wade. In the year 2005, Grant Hill returned to all-star form. What would that mean for the Miami Heat and the Detroit Pistons title hopes that season? Shaquille O'Neal is now in Miami. The Detroit Pistons ultimately went back to the NBA Finals. Having a running mate like Tim Duncan would generate championship success for Tracy McGrady. Would the threat of Duncan and Tracy McGrady in the East force Shaq and Kobe to remain a duo for the entirety of their careers? And the most obvious and important question of this entire what if: how does this impact the legacy of LeBron James? Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, let me know in the comments if there is a what if that you would like Outside the Playbook to narrate. That's one more for the good guys.